He played a doctor with The Who, and he also played Doctor Who. Now Peter Capaldi is going toe to toe with Cush Jumbo, who has just a phenomenal name, by the way. Well, they're sparring in the new Apple original crime series, Criminal Record. It's a weekly release, so is it going to keep you coming back each time? An anonymous phone call draws two brilliant detectives into a confrontation over an old murder case. One, a young woman in the early stages of her career, the other, a well connected man determined to protect his legacy. So it's nothing new to watch Peter Capaldi play a character that skirts the line between good and bad. And in Apple's Criminal Record, I spent the majority of the show wavering back and forth trying to determine if the dude is just a bit shady or if he's a full on dirty cop. Cush Jumbo plays a detective sergeant who gets mixed up in a possible wrongful conviction case while routinely going over emergency calls. And the character, she can come across as a bit whiny, but in reality, she's coming up against strife and prejudices at just about every turn. And I love the passion Jumbo brings to the character of June Linker. She's a warrior for the underdog and seems to find herself consistently having her good intentions turned back around on her. Now, the series is 8 episodes long, with a weekly release schedule following the 2-episode premiere. The old murder case that pits Linker against Capaldi's Haggerty is somewhat the central focus, but it's more Jumbo's interest in and investigation of Haggerty's handling of the case. Now, their dealings are tense with strained conversations that are just rife with veiled threats and intimidation. And I was engrossed in how they collided thanks to their hubris and flawed confidence. And there's so much drama and angst that arises because while they share certain similarities, they approach them from completely different sets of values and motivations. Now, I appreciate that the story includes additional cases and complexities other than the potential wrongful murder case. Now, these moments, they allow us to see both Capaldi and Jumbo in different scenarios and work to create instances of reasonable doubt as to what we might have previously suspected about a character. Now, some of Capaldi's character reminded me of Idris Elba's character of Luther on the show of that same name. Now, Luther, he's a copper who seemingly rides the line of lawful and lawless, doing what's necessary just to solve a case or catch a killer. Now, with Luther, at the heart, we know he's a good guy. But with Haggerty, it's harder to determine, and that uncertainty adds a good dimension to this story. Both characters get their fair share of plot complications, and each of the actors delivers a performance that stings of truth. Now, I love how the entire plot, with all the side stories that we see play out, revolve around family. And it makes for a relatable narrative highlighting that while circumstances aren't identical, or maybe even similar, hardships and heartaches exist because of family relationships. Now, some of the story, especially around episodes 4 and 5, begins to become a tad tiresome because the scenarios feel somewhat revisited. Like the moments may be different, but the interactions and the general plot specifics feel very familiar, like we've seen them before already within this show. But with that being said, episode 6 put me on the edge of my seat. There was an intensity and urgency to the narrative that gripped me, and then it wouldn't let my attention wander. I think it's because we get this large culmination of events. And even if some are obvious, the combination of everything coming to a head and then character revelations being uncovered, it made for an exciting watch. Now, if you've seen my reviews before, you know I'm a big fan of British productions. There's a certain style that many productions utilize that just creates more of a cinematic aesthetic than what is really typical from American series productions. The cinematography and the camera framings, they look wonderful. For me, they also help to draw my eye into the scene. I also appreciate the more muted color palette that's used in the color grading. It creates a colder or even sinister or sketchy air to the scenes, creating this more melancholy vibe without having to spell it out in obvious ways. And that's not to say that there aren't some vibrant uses of color, because there are. And these scenes, they're balanced with shadowy settings that work to establish mystery or even malice. And there's a definite social commentary that's being addressed within the story. And while at first it felt a little on the nose or maybe preachy, I grew to appreciate the directness of the message so that it couldn't be misunderstood. I also think the commentary fits well within the theme and the story. It's a natural element within the plot rather than something that's trying to be shoehorned in. And I like that there's some explosive and tough conversations that we watch play out. They help to illustrate different mindsets and how one person may see their words as innocuous, but to the receiver, they're piercing and reinforce terrible messages that people experience on a daily basis. Now, in addition to Jumbo and Capaldi, there are some stand-up performances from Tom Mucci, Stephen Campbell Moore, Kathy Tyson, and Rasat Kokoyi. The dynamics of the cast and the way they approach their characters create some very touching and devastating moments. The show is steeped in tragedy, and the supporting characters step up to form both memorable and palpable moments. Now, I'm curious about how audiences are going to respond to the final scene of the show. In one sense, it can kind of be ambiguous, but I actually think it's very concrete, but maybe not satisfying just because of how it can reflect reality. I also don't see this open for a second season, but maybe there is an angle that can be examined to continue following certain characters. Now, for as obvious as some of the mystery is within the story, there are a few elements that caught me completely off guard, and I loved it. I mean, the surprises, they not only kept me engaged, but also made me appreciate the cleverness of the presentation. So, overall, Criminal Record is a captivating crime drama, pitting two dynamic and passionate characters against each other in a battle of hubris and morals. Cush Jumbo shines by delivering a character who is vulnerable but also tough, fighting the battles she believes are just, and Peter Capaldi creates a persona who effectively masks his intentions and motivations. While the story lulls a bit in a couple of episodes and some of the trajectories are predictable, a renewed energy and excitement comes into play in episode 6, reinvigorating the narrative and propelling it towards an emotional and poignant conclusion. There's no sex or nudity, a lot of profanity, and some brutal violence, including domestic abuse. I give Criminal Record 4 out of 5 couches. So, do you have a favorite crime drama series that you recommend to people? Let me know what it is in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.